In this lesson, we're going to learn how to implement system event triggers. Now, a system event trigger is not like the DML trigger, where we were actually performing some type of DML activity to a table. These are for the system as a whole, the database environment as a whole. So that is the big difference. Instead of specifying one object within the database, this is something that we're doing with the entire database. So we're going to learn about these system event triggers. We're going to learn how to define the scope, use the available system events, and then finally I'm going to show you some of the system event attributes that we have available to us that we can incorporate within our triggers. Now, I am going to show you some of the most commonly used, but I have created a PDF that shows you a pretty good list of a lot of these attributes that you might use. But remember, in this course and in this lesson, this is not a big deep dive. This is more of an introduction to a system event trigger, and I'm going to show you that it can be done and how you might be able to use it. So, what are system event triggers? Well, like I said, when we start talking about a DML event trigger, we're performing some type of action against a table or a view. With a system event trigger, we are tracking some activity that is taking place within the database environment as a whole, like the user logging on, or an error occurs, or who knows what. So it's more high level for us to work with. So now system event triggers are segregated into two different categories. The first category are database events, and these occur for any user or any schema within the database as part of a database internal process. So like I said, this is like a user logging onto the system or some error occurs. We also have schema events, where this is limited to perhaps a single user or to a single schema. So it's not as widespread. So that is the key difference when we start talking about the different system event triggers. Are they database wide or are they schema? So that's the big thing. So the system event trigger syntax looks almost identical to a standard DML event, with one or actually two major differences. We still have our create or replace trigger name, before or after, but after we specify before or after, we specify an event name. So we're not specifying a table and insert or update or delete, we are specifying the event. Then after that, we specify whether this is going to occur on the database or on the schema. After that, everything else is the same. We still have our declare, we have our begin, we have our exception, we even have our end. So everything else is pretty much the same. Now, the other thing you need to be aware of is that you have the system-defined event attributes. These attributes we're going to discuss in more detail at the end of this lesson, but basically these are keywords that we can use that give us more information about some attribute within the database. And this could be the logon username, the IP address, it could be a number of different things. So here is a system event trigger example where we have our create or replace trigger, and we're calling this start tally. And we have it occurring after you log on for a specific schema. And then we have begin, we have our stats.tally stats, this is a package, and we have three parameters where we have the start trigger count, start proc count, and the start package count. But then what we're going to do is insert into the table messages information about who logged on. So we say the values are going to be the IP address for, and then we have the ORA underscore login underscore user. This is the login username of the person who just logged into the system. But then we can also specify we can use the ORA client IP address, which will give us the IP address associated to that logon. So now, if we can track the IP address and the username, now we can track where people are logging into the database. What is their IP address? Not only that, we can start performing some tests on that table to see, okay, we know these 5 different IP addresses, what's this one? So you can find out who's actually logging into your system. So this is basically what we're talking about when we start talking about a system event trigger. We're not talking about a table or a view. Now we're talking about the database as a whole, and that is the key difference. So now what we're going to do is start diving into this a little bit more and see what else we can do. What are some of the things that we can test for within a system event trigger?